Okay, so welcome everybody to this little session here. We got the wonderful Andreas, Volker, and DJ. Would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Shall I go first? I'm DJ Adams, developer advocate at SAP, and yeah, I've been hacking around and developing in the SAP world for quite a long time. So, and I have opinions. So, and a beer too. So, cheers. That's me.
So I'll take the cheers and I'll go second. Volker Buzek, I work as development architect at JNSsoft, a small specialized tech company in Germany. And I work mostly in the mobile/web sector. And I have opinions and I have beer. And I would like to have a cigarette, but I don't smoke anymore since 15 years now. So.
Hi everybody, my name is Andreas Gautsch. I am working for an SAP customer, Heller in Austria, and I'm doing development in ABAP and also in .NET, so C#. And yeah, let's start.
Yes, and I'm Ronnie, and I'm a UX developer working with the Fiori primarily, and also a SAP cloud platform specialist, they call me. And I'm here with my Tech Bull.
Nice.
So today's discussion is supposed to be about the developer tooling. And the subtopic was, what do people use and what would they really like to use and why? And this got me thinking about when I started in working with the SAP space, because that was like only 5 years ago. And when I started, I knew a bit of web development from beforehand. And I started up with working with SAP, and it was ECC6. I started to learn ABAP, and I learned about SE80. And I was like, this was interesting, because I had used other tools before, and it was very strange for me to like work inside the environment. And then when I started working with Fiori, and then the web IDE showed up, and we got like a cloud and native environment. But it was still a bit strange, because I have this view of sort of what is the best practice of the business. And then we had this SAP on the side. So that was sort of the start. But then I've seen, like, over the 5 years I've been working, like the change that has been happening, how we are moving towards, like, what do we call the standard tooling, and I've been thinking a bit about how that affects us, and also how it affects our workflows. Like, I know you can do ABAP, or you should probably do ABAP in Eclipse. So could we use that as a starting point of the discussion?
Sure thing. I mean, what you've experienced is the thing that DJ basically has shown throughout the years. Yeah, he started off with some centralized tooling and then drifted off now to a state where terminal it is.
The future is terminal. Exactly. Funnily enough, I mean, I'm just thinking back to where I first started with SAP. Back in the R2 days in the 80s, we were developing on terminals then, in terminals, and actually, ironically, we started out writing ABAP, for example, and writing assembler as well, but writing ABAP in a regular non-SAP editor. That was the ISPF editor, for example. But we've as ABAP sort of grew into something more than a report writing language, and it moved into, let's call it, a mainstream application development language. Then, of course, we moved away from that into, well, what was TM38, SE38, SE80, and SE24 when objects came along and so on. But all four of us were discussing briefly before we started this chat, this panel. There's so much to discuss, and there's so many layers to sort of unpack. It's almost like not knowing where to start. But one of the layers that is definitely in my mind is the fact that when we're talking about Eclipse now and the ABAP development tools and ABAP developer tools and so on, I think to many people, you think ABAP is a language, which of course it is, but it's so embedded within the ABAP server. I mean, the clue's in the name, I suppose, as well, with the data dictionary and previous as well with the DINPro processor and so on. It's a lot more than a language as well. It's almost like a way of life for developers within the SAP world, and maybe that is part of the reason why, to you, Ronnie, when you first came along, things felt a little bit different because it was so SAP centric. Is that fair?
Yes, it felt very, can I say, alien compared to what I saw in other spaces or other technology stacks.
What I'm wondering is, when I first started out, SA80, of course, was all over the place. And even though usability might have been neglectable, so to speak, it was such a quick tool, because all you needed was an access to a system. You hack in SE80 and you could start developing in no time, like as soon as you had the account. And also, and then I'll hand over to Andreas, and also the shortcuts. I didn't need the mouse. Yeah, I just could go and then go.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that is when you look back, an traditional SAP system, it's integrated and you have everything there. And developing inside this tool is also about security. So you don't leave the tool, the user does not leave the tool, and also the developer does not leave the tool. Out the system, I think CDS views is a good example. And that means also a shift for the tooling. I need to do more than developing inside the system. I have to do also other things like exposing the services and also developing, for example, web interfaces. And I think there is the major shift where we have to change something on the tooling, or the change is necessary.
I'm wondering whether the shift in tooling is a side effect of the shift, the slow but gradual shift in focus from developing UIs inside of SAP with traditional DINPro or web DINPro or whatever, to seeing the ABAP stack as a black box, a headless system where you would build services to be consumed elsewhere. And this is of course where CDS comes in. This is of course part of the philosophy that is driving the restrictions that are deliberately placed on Steampunk, for example, and the focus on CDS first, OData first, do your UIs elsewhere, right? And so as the transition as we've seen that transition happen, it also makes sense to see the transition of tooling from inside of SAP to outside of SAP, or inside of SAP stacks to outside of SAP stacks.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point. It feels a little as if the UI that's supposed to be current, or that the UI technology to come, also in part drives the tooling for the entire system development in the SAP Cosmos. Yeah. So as you said, you had SE80 with DINPros perfectly fine. Then you had Web DINPro and Floorplan Manager and whatnot, and all of a sudden Eclipse sort of was the better thing. And then you move on to OData, loosely coupled systems, and then all of a sudden it's as if, yeah, of course Eclipse is the thing to do. Why would you do it with any other tool? Yeah. And then if you look at the very current state of things, also in my area of working mostly, you have Visual Studio Code, you have WebStorm, so you have classic web development accessoires that you now use to develop against or for an SAP system. So that, because of course the UI is more web-centric now with UI5 and the Fiori applications. So it's as if the UI that is supposed to be the standard sort of drives the tooling along with it.
Yeah, it's almost like, instead of standing and working within a machine, you're standing and working next to a machine, as it were.
I think the second thing which you have, it's, for example, if you start with object-oriented programming, then in Eclipse, I think for me it's much better than with SE80. And another thing is that developers see now the other toolings. So for me, it's, for example, Visual Studio, which possibilities I have there, and I want to have them also with ABAP development.
Actually, we got a question from Jan in the comment section that touches a bit about the tooling on your side, the ABAP side. He asks if will Eclipse survive the next couple of years, or VS Code will take over, or there will be a new cloud studio. Because I guess Eclipse now, since we got now a bit nasty to Eclipse, but we got better tooling for the UI5 development. I see that Eclipse is probably now primarily a ABAP and a CDS tool.
There's a huge tool infrastructure, set of infrastructures that's been built for Eclipse in the form of ADT. I mean, maybe Andreas, you're probably better positioned to speak about that than I am.
I'm not sure about it, and I think the future will show it. For the next years, I think Eclipse is very powerful. But what you see now in Visual Code, for example, with CDS views, you can already do a lot of things. Generally, I don't think that there will be one tool, and the future will show. And what's the best tool for your project, for your company, and for your personality?
That's an interesting point that you're raising there. You know, like as if there's not the one tool that you're supposed to use, but you're more like a craftsman that needs to use several tools in order to achieve a task at hand. And I can only second this. For example, in my area, we used WebStorm for the longest time. And WebStorm is also Java-based from the runtime. And we had to ditch it at some point because it was just too slow. You couldn't open multiple projects next to each other and then sort of switch quickly between them because it hindered you in your development flow. But so we switched to Visual Studio Code, and it's fast and it's lean, and you can easily start it, shut it down, and there's a whole incredible ecosystem behind it. But then again, every now and then we switch back to WebStorm because it's got such an amazing Git client. So when there's like Git bisect work to do, when you have to track down a bug from left and right on the time base, there's no way you can really do it well with Visual Studio Code. So we switched to WebStorm.
So it's
and
more
solve that task.
So the workflow
And then,
it's more based on
to
task.
sum it up, you want to have your opinion on Web IDE as you want, but for extension projects in the Fiori space, no way you can do it adequately with Visual Studio Code. So you have your tool set, as you said, Andreas, and you have your tool set, you master your tool set, and you choose the right tool for the task at hand.
I think it's fair to say, I mean, and other people have said this as well, that we as the development community have been wishing to move away from the proprietary nature of some of the stuff that we're used to in the past. But actually, that comes at a price as well, which is, exactly as Volker's described. We've got to work out, okay, what are the tools that I actually need now? Again, I don't want to anchor us to the ABAP world of discussion, the discussion of the ABAP world, but when in developing inside an ABAP system, everything was done for you, or it was almost like everything was done to you, whether you wanted it or not. This is your editor, this is your version control system, sort of. This is your transport system. This is your data dictionary. Like it or leave, right? Which was restricting, but also really comfortable. So now in the outside world, in the quote unquote real, in the real world, we've got to all of a sudden we've got to think, okay, how are we going to do the version control? How are we going to do the editing? How are we do the coordination? How are we going to coordinate the transports and everything? And so it's the agony of choice and the ecstasy of choice at the same time. And I think, as Volker has said as well, we're I think many of us, and me included, are all in awe of VS Code right now, and it is fantastic. But one thing that history has shown us, especially in this area, is that something else will come along, and VS Code. I've no idea, but it may be that VS Code wanes in terms of popularity. Something else comes along, and so it really is down to the developer as craftsperson to make sure that they have the set of tools that they need to do their job, whatever comes along. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all tool anymore.
No.
But I have a question to Andreas. But I'm familiar with Eclipse at least somehow for the ABAP development, even though I don't do it, but with the tool itself. Now, would you use the same tool as the tool of choice for the steampunk environment? So for ABAP in the cloud, is that the same?
For the moment, I think yes. So with steampunk, it's very fast. Also this is one thing you can really, if you try it out, and depends, of course, where the development goes. If it's highly web developing based, then maybe not. But for me personally, I don't use it productively. Only I have to try it out, but I think it's a good tooling.
One of the things that's just want to go back to, Volker's, happy sort of reminder of, the future is terminal, this thing I go on about all the time. Just moving away from tools temporarily and specifically to workflow, and maybe almost like as the dial tone for developers, from my perspective, is I want to see what's going on underneath. I want to see what's going on with these open protocols that are now our bread and butter. Take HTTP as the core example, OData as a more application oriented example. Just those two examples. I want to do that with my bare hands, as it were, rather than use all the time or rely on all the time tools like the wonderful tools like Postman or even the REST client in VS Code or whatever. And this is one of the reasons why I think that the tool that has endured for me the most is the terminal, right? Case in point as well. If we look at the amount of stuff that an average cloud platform focused developer does now with Cloud Foundry, and of course there's the SAP Cloud Platform Cockpit, which is great, really convenient, but at some stage you may think, I really need to get my hands dirty with this, and I'm going to move to the command line with the CF CLI command. And probably some of us, I think all of us here, and some of the audience may know that with Cloud Platform, there's now this new set of features, Feature Set B, people are calling it. And in Feature Set B, if you have an account, you have access to a command line client called SAP CP. And again, that just opens up all sorts of possibilities for doing things with your bare hands and also building other things on top and building your own mini workflows.
That's a really interesting aspect, because we observed that for the last, let's say, year or so, that there's a shift from the notion, here's the GUI for you as a developer, to here is like the tooling and use it as you'd like to use it. So, CLI first of sorts. If you look at the CAP, the Cloud Application Programming Model, the very first thing that came out was the bare NPM command line module, a node module that you could use. And in whatever environment you worked or you were most comfortable with, take it and do a, CDS init bookshop. And then you had the same notion coming along for UI5 with the UI5 tooling. So they said, here's the command line client. We don't care whether you're on Linux, Windows, Mac, whatever. Here it is. Now you do UI5 serve, and there's your local web server with all the extensions that are there. And now I just wish that sort of things we'd have the same thing in the ABAP environment, and you're describing it for the cloud platform environment now. So, I just wish that in Fiori and UI5 development, and also with the business application studio, there'd be a more CLI first approach, other than, here's the tool and now you need to use it.
So let's go ahead. Sorry. Go
on. Because that's into another observation I had, and that is sort of, I see it as a sort of a culture shift. And it might be that I'm viewing it wrong, but it's been a culture shift inside of SAP of how they do things. Because to me, the thing that they are actually releasing, like the CDS CLI and the CF CLIs, and also like creating extensions for VS Code, shows that there is a new way of thinking. And then the business application studio is sort of more, I know it's perhaps the first priority, but that's more the business side. But that is more to cater for those who want the SE80 of the cloud. So people want more, perhaps the enterprises wants to buy a service and then push the developers in there. But now we actually at least have the choice. What do you think about that?
That's an interesting question also to Andreas and DJ. So if I have the CLI first approach with many of the most prominent technologies in the SAP sector, why do such a thing as the Business Application Studio at the same time and not decide either or? So is the right way to go like, here, developers, here's our tooling, now use it at your will? Or is it the right way to say, here's the tool, you have to use the tool in order to get things done? Or is it a mixture of both?
I think it's a mixture. I mean, in some ways, the teams building the Business Application Studio, I guess they feel as though sometimes they're between a rock and a hard place, because there are folks like us who are CLI first, terminal first. Just give me the pipe and I'll connect to it. Just give me a port and I'll telnet into it and do everything I need to do that way. Well, that's one extreme. But the other extreme is, as sort of Ronnie intimated, there are organizations, and this is going back to my consulting days, that won't touch anything unless it's got an SAP stamp on it, for whatever reason, for valid reasons, for not so valid reasons, and also that I guess there's the tooling, the wizards that need to exist somewhere somehow. And I know that Volker's going to say something about this anyway, but they need to be placed and made available somewhere. So I guess in my view, the Business Application Studio came along at the right time to cater for almost like both ends of the spectrum, because obviously it's Thayer based, Eclipse Thayer based. So we have the VS Code style integrated terminal, which is absolutely the best decision in that direction. But at the same time, you've got all the comfort of the wizards as well. It's not, I wouldn't say that it's my first choice for a development environment, but it's because I use Vim, right? I'm a super extreme. But I know, Volker, you've mentioned before, Business Application Studio versus VS Code, right?
Yeah. So the question there is, but I get the notion of from an organization perspective, you need the SAP stamp on top of things in order to get the developer onboarding with whatever corporate policy there is. But then at the same time, what I'm not getting is once you deliver an alternative, why don't you build it up layer-wise? Yeah. So let's take the UI5 Fiori spectrum as an extreme example. Yeah. So you have the UI5 CLI. Why don't we get all the Fiori plugins just like so, and then you build it up into like a sort of conglomerate of sorts, and then plug it into the application studio, but give us the choice of whether we use the different parts underneath, or we use the layers, or we even use the Business Application Studio. What I don't get is that, like, for at least the Fiori and UI5 set, you get that hat put on. Here's the Business Application Studio. Now use that for your Fiori development. Yeah, that's like, I feel as if my mom's talking to me. Yeah, you have to or I'll slap you.
But I think,
go ahead, Andreas.
I think for organization, the standardization is very important. So there are corporate policies like security. If you use your open source tools, you cannot be sure that there's coming some fraud systems in. But it's also about, if you have developer and the teams are changing, if you have different tooling, then you have the ramp up is always a bit more complicated. So from the top, from the management, it would be wishable that everybody uses the same tool. I don't think that this is the best way, and also from each personality needs have his needs, and also projects have the need for some toolings. But I think the standardization is coming often from management and in organization. I think it's also a valid point to get to a standard with or without an SAP stamp on it.
Yeah, I guess what we've got to remember is that this discussion right now, the four people in this in front of me on the screen, and also folks listening and watching and asking questions, we're almost like at the sharp end of this triangle, this or the long tail or whatever, and right,
the sharp end.
At the sharp end of the tail, the sharp tail end. Well, I don't know. Anyway, this is good beer. No, just kidding. But again, just thinking back to my days at the organization I was working at before I joined SAP, only a couple of years ago, at Bluefin, we had a ton of developers, onshore and offshore. I was writing the standardization, the standard operating procedures almost for, development, development factory style thing, and that would have been immensely difficult if I had not had the web IDE as you will use the web IDE. In order to do this, you will use this. In order to do that, you will use that, because we were talking to hundreds of developers. And so that point definitely rings true with me, Andreas. And I'm not sure that it's a one size fits all by any means. And I guess all I'm saying is that the people at the sharp end of the tail, we are free to do whatever we need to. But I completely agree with you, Volker, that this layering approach, maybe the Business Application Studio is the next step, or the next enabling step to say, actually, yeah, okay, we're talking about the extensions now. They're compatible with VS Code. You can bring VS Code extensions in the Application Studio. Okay, so how can we move on from there as well?
Yeah, I just hope they're like getting the turnaround, that they don't start with release it on Business Application Studio first, and then you have to use it there, but they're doing it the other way around. Whoever is responsible, as in they, yeah. So they're releasing the individual tools, be it CLIs or Visual Studio Code extensions first, and then give us the freedom as developers to say, okay, we use it in the context of the Application Studio, or we use it individually in whatever means fits you. Yeah?
And also, it makes sense because we know that Business Application Studio, what a name, can run Visual Studio Code extensions. So it would actually make sense to create them as extensions, because then you could, the minute they're created, you can run them in Business Application Studio.
Yeah.
So, but I think we should try to shift the gears. We are talking not about one special tool now. First, just to take something in from the comments here. People have opinions there too. So there's a lot of Eclipse is heavy, and they are hoping that there is something on Visual Studio Code because it's more lightweight. There was a question about what Business Application Studio was, if it's just VS Code wrapped with SAP wrappings. So if I recall correctly, Business Application Studio is based on Eclipse Thea, which uses the same code editor as Visual Studio Code, and they have also adopted the same extension architecture. Am I correct?
Yes.
The similarities sort of stop there.
Yeah, that's basically correct. And is it also true that there's a really basic version of an IDE, quote unquote, an IDE on Google Cloud Platform in the VM that you have access to, and that's also based on Eclipse Thea.
And also you got Visual Studio Code, but this is actually a trend in the market. We saw when they had the Microsoft Build right now.
Yeah.
The GitHub code spaces.
Yeah.
So we see this trend that there is like someone likes to have an online tool that makes especially onboarding easier. That was sort of the main selling point of GitHub.
But see, that is an interesting point that you're raising there, because we're not anymore talking about use a CLI or use a terminal or use a GUI, but we're talking about the process of how quickly can you start coding for a project, or how quickly can you get productive. And at that point, I mean, what they showed and what everybody can try out with code spaces is just mind-blowing. You have your source control system, and then you have one button that says start editing. Boom, editor boots up that is pre-configured, and I think this is the selling point. It's
Yes.
pre-configured to the way you're supposed to work content-wise.
Mhm.
And then it's your choice as a developer to either continue working in the cloud as in the browser with the IDE or
Mhm.
connect your local tooling to it. But
Yes.
the very tedious way of getting on board, of getting productive is, you know, a button click away.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think that approach sort of is way better than, you know, banging your head CLI versus GUI. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But now you're actually touching a very interesting point. If I like look at my own workflow, say for the last 6 months or something, going from I have things in my computer running on my computer and editing on my computer to adopting on my Windows machine, Windows subsystem for Linux, and using Visual Studio Code remote sessions. So I'm actually working on Linux in Windows, remoting into the system, and it's the same that they use on GitHub Spaces, but where you can in your local installation of Visual Studio Code, can remote into. I think I actually showed. Oh, don't go there. Talk about history, but I think that's now you're talking about a lightweight tool that has extreme large potential to affect your workflow.
Yeah, but they're using the right medium at the right time for the right task. You know, I remember when DJ once said, I don't know in what context, I just remember what you said, and you said, you know, the future is the web, get over it. Yeah. So don't discuss like Objective-C versus Swift versus Java versus Bash, I don't know what, you know, accept the fact that the web is the web. And
the web is the new
look at
native.
what we're doing right now, huh?
Yeah. The web is the true native.
Could I bring up? We lost Andreas.
Have we lost Andreas? Maybe he'll be back.
Yeah. Hopefully he'll be back.
Oh, he's back.
He's back. Yeah.
Put the bottle on the mouse. You know?
Maybe he just went to get another beer.
Probably.
Oh, sure.
If we could sort of look how the tooling affects our workflow, because I'll bring the discussion back to ABAP actually with this, because to me it seemed like the thing I'm going to mention was a sort of a revolution when it came, and that was when we got Git for ABAP.
Yeah.
Can perhaps Andreas say something about how that has changed the workflow for the ABAP developer? Like for me, Git has sort of been it's a natural part of my workflow, but as I understood, this was not the case for ABAP before ABAP Git came along.
I think with ABAP and Git, it's currently changing, or they are advised to change it. If I go back to what Volker mentioned, this one-click development, which for me, I was very impressed if I started with the cloud platform. You go there, start the service, choose a template, and you can start with developing. And everything is, of course, in a versioning system. With ABAP, we have that too, but it is on your proprietary system inside the database of now in HANA or former in the other SAP database. So the topic with ABAP is that everything, also the ABAP code, is inside the database. And to get it outside to the Git repository works, but sometimes does not work if you think on user exits and all these integrated things of Dynpros. Therefore, I think Git is changed a lot, especially when you think about sharing projects. If you go, someone can develop some ABAP code, put it on GitHub, and you import it in your system. That was not possible before. But really, this whole development process connected to Git with the releasing to the Git, and from the Git to the test system, and from the Git repository to the productive system is really hard to achieve. maybe in the ABAP cloud platform, but on the on-premise systems, it's hard to do.
Yeah, I have to give it to you for that, because I remember, or not, I don't remember, I work with it daily, the transport system of the SAP on-premise world. I mean, it's evolved over centuries, literally, and it's such a great tool still. You know, I don't care about how well it's implemented. It's so robust. I mean, the idea of the whole transport, the process transport level is so great. You know, I would like to have that with essentially any kind of development, be it now with Git underneath or anything else. So, but then, of course, that approach somehow contradicts the Git approach, where you have multiple branches, where you can switch between things very quickly and you don't have to go through the entire process. But at the same time, you could combine the two. So my question is it possible to blend together the transport system of the on-premise world with Git for different media as well, like cloud-based development, web development, steampunk development?
I don't know. DJ, do you know some internals about the GCTS project that was presented in November? GCTS, it's Git and Central Transport System. This is exactly that. It's an SAP project where they want to bring that together. So you stay with the transport system, and I agree with you, this is such a good thing. If you start the project, this is there. And you have not to think about the quality control from development, test to productive system. But of course, this Git-based approach is missing there. And SAP works, this was my last stand on the approach to bring exactly these two components together with the GCTS project.
Yeah, I mean, I know of it. I don't know any details, but I mean, the thing that appeals to me about that, you know, unholy or holy sort of matrimony of, you know, Git and CTS is that, as Volker has described, you know, the century-old CTS the CTS approach with the data files and the co files, you know, happy memories with NFS mounts and so on. You know, that is so embedded, and it's not only doing what part of Git does in terms of transport, but it's also so embedded in the way that you know, enterprise sets of ABAP stacks are managed. You know, all the way from solution manager, all the way through the whole set of layers of organization, which again, you know, is very sort of enterprisey. But at the same time, one of the things that was always really missing for me in CTS, and this is speaking as someone who used to give on behalf of SAP a long time ago the BC 120 course, you know, CTS course. What was always missing was the ability to distinguish between two different versions of an artifact. You know, because of the way that things were stored, and you know, to us now, all those four people speaking on this call and all the people listening, you know, it's just so very natural to think of things in terms of text files that are diffable. But of course, CTS has existed since the early 1990s, right? And so that really wasn't even a glint in Linus Torvalds' eye at the time from a version control system. Yes, there were things like CVS, which were awful. So that, I think if they can achieve that with GCTS, then great. I don't think what we can't do, I think, is just not that anybody's suggesting this, is throw away the whole CTS approach and replace it with, you know, a pure Git based solution. I don't think that will fly.
Yeah, but then at the same time, what I'm wondering now, so we sort of had the talk about CLI versus GUIs versus an entire different approach of onboarding developers. Now we're at how do you move code from one platform to the other, or from one environment to the other. Now I'm also, I mean, if you get CTS plus Git, I'm like, yes. But then if you look at how a distributed development team uses Git sometimes, like you go like, no, don't use it that way.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's literally 17 commits that only have a dot in the subject and have, let's say, 53 changed files. Yeah. And all of them are just because the source code style was formatted differently.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to get across is, if you have the freedom of such a great versioning tool as Git is, then you at the same time need to have, again, some rules in place that everybody at least tries to use that system similarly at the same time.
Mhm.
And then it feels as if, there's a logistics approach in place. All of a sudden, now you have the transport, you have Git, now you need additional things so that everybody can work together smoothly. Yeah. So I'm wondering, how would you go about, a unified approach of using a decentralized tool?
It's a really hard problem,
Mhm.
I think.
I'll just bring in a comment from the comment section or the chat. It's actually Lars Peterson that says it, and it's that the way to look at this is what he says: use Git for development and the transport system for deployment. And he brings in that in the Java world they use Git for development and Nexus for artifact deployment. And like this makes sense. This is the way I look upon it when I do UI5, especially on on-prem systems, because I only I view my development objects that live in Git, and when I talk to people downstream in on-prem, I talk about the runtime artifacts that I push down to the transport system, where the transport system takes over and puts that in. So like there isn't a conflict there. They are supplementing each other.
Yeah, I was wondering, why don't they put Lars in charge anyway of that entire topic at SAP? Like, get the guy sitting there and let him do his thing, and then everything will be cool,
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. So, hey, Lars, you're hired. I don't have any say, but still.
Me neither, but
we are actually good on time here. If I could introduce a new subject that I feel strongly about, and I know at least one more person in this chat feels a bit strongly about it, and I would like to bring in the UI5 space and how the new tooling there has helped with raising the quality control of what you're producing.
I wonder who that could be.
I wonder who that could be.
I wonder who that could be.
Because I feel that there has been a tremendous set of work, and we have now some great tools to actually test what we create.
I mean, honestly, if you look at the UI5 tooling, as in the concept of a tooling for UI5, everybody has been doing that from the very beginning. Yeah, so I remember at, I think, the second UI5 con or so, there were some guys showing a UI5 tooling of sorts that was already really complete, and it had many bells and whistles of live reloading and proxying and whatnot. And then at another sessions, some guys showed the very same thing with a different set of technologies. And that already illustrates the point. You were at or it was very hard to decide, what do I use? So there were too many options. And I think the time the official UI5 tooling came along, it wasn't as if it was better than anything else out there.
No.
The selling point was it was by the guys who actually make UI5.
Right.
And you could, from the very beginning, be sure, they're not going to drop it and they're not going to screw up. So it was like for me, a very natural move of saying, of course, that's the go-to tooling, just because I know I can rely on it. And I can rely on the fact that they cater to the very fast-paced nature of the web. Yeah, because if you're talking about tooling, it once was grunt, then it was gulp, now it's npm scripts, then there's yarn. So the whole thing moves along very fast. And if you do not have people who cater towards the speed with a tooling set that you rely on for your everyday work, you might actually be hindered in your production, in your code production. So what I'm trying to say is the UI5 guys release a tooling, you use the tooling because it's by them.
And it's by them and used by them as well. It's sort of battle tested before it even hits the streets. And I've had the privilege of working with those folks there, and it's just like walking through corridors of genius, and the whole sort of development flow is just you can hear the sort of the hum, the zing through the corridors, because they're using these tools day in, day out, and they write them and they improve and they write them and improve them. It is a wonder. There are many groups like this all around, but that particular experience will always be special to me, because it's like this is a highly tuned team, a highly tuned army of people doing this stuff.
Yeah, and also what I really admire is from the very beginning they released it as open source. They didn't really care about what is the process of, and the support and BCP and where we're going to work the issues and blah blah blah. They just said, and here hats off to Andreas Kunz, who did the whole open UI5 thing with UI5. I think they just surfed on that wave, and it's a damn good surf.
I think it's sort of we're back at that culture shift, and they have sort of that team has spearheaded the culture shift inside SAP. So, thank you for bringing it up. We got we got one here from the chat again, and I would really like to bring this into. It's Lars again, and I will just say what he has written. He says, when talking about the editors and language support, have a look at the language server protocol.
My God, Lars, you read my mind.
And I know you like that. So I don't have any talking points on it, but you can probably talk for hours on it. So I'll give the word to you.
So I was trying to figure, how can I wedge in a change of subject to the language server protocol in the next 5 minutes, because we've only got a few minutes left.
You got 11 minutes.
Oh, 11 minutes. So Lars, thank you. Yeah, again, thinking in terms of component pieces, component parts. You build things from Lego pieces. The whole language server protocol, which is a Microsoft invention. I want to give them a shout out for that, because it's a wonderful thing. For those who don't know what the language server protocol is, it's basically instead of Volker mentioned, what was the editor you mentioned? The Java-based editor. WebStorm and IntelliJ and Eclipse and VS Code and all these different editors. Why write a lump of that code for that editor that knows about JavaScript, a lump that knows about CDS, a lump that knows about XYZ? Why write one lump and have a protocol and have a communication? So you got one language server knowing about ABAP, knowing about, see what I did there, knowing about CDS, knowing about JavaScript. Connect that to your editor, and so you're sort of sparing brain CPU cycles writing all this stuff repeatedly for every single new IDE that comes out, and you write one thing. So one example is, of course, with CAP, the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model. The support that is available through the VS Code extension for CAP or for CDS, that wonderful support uses the compiler from CAP, from the CAP project, through the language server protocol. And so theoretically and practically, it's available in other editors. In fact, I use it in Vim because I used a Vim plugin that talks to the LSP protocol. I'm talking to exactly the same thing that the team has written for VS Code, but I've got it in Vim, and the same thing goes. So that's another way that we were talking about extensions before for VS Code that would be that would work in the Business Application Studio and vice versa. Go down one level deeper, as it were, and LSP is a super important thing to think about as well.
Mhm.
And I was absolutely amazed when I thought, well, how does this extension work from CDS? Oh, it's a zip file. Let's have a look in the zip file. What's LSP? Oh, LSP. Right. Okay. Great. Yeah. It's building on the shoulders of open source, building on open source giants. And one of the we started the whole conversation, and my mind was back in the 80s when I started with SAP, in pre-ABAP days. Everything was very proprietary. Everything was a very SAP, and things have turned inside out, and everything now is open.
Mhm.
So instead of inventing something new, right, let's use LSP. Right, let's use OAuth. Right, let's use OData, for example. Anyway, that was a bit of a ramble.
But it makes so much sense that they can communicate, concentrate on what they actually want to build that differs from all the others, instead of inventing everything again and again and again.
So are we going to?
It's sort of. I will just finish this. It's sort of like what's happening on the SAP Cloud Platform. Like, instead of just mirroring all the other providers, focus on what differs you or what makes your platform valuable. And then, like with the Project Embrace, bring in services from, in this case, Azure, instead of just replicating the service. And it's sort of the same way all down in our terminal, that like use what already exists and build upon it, instead of spending lots of money and time to just reinvent what already exists.
Yeah.
Did you have?
And we see that. No. Go for it, Andreas. Did you say?
Yeah, I think exactly that it is. It's not always good if you have to go very deep and make all on your own and build all on your own, but you have also to have the possibility to look down. So if I am on a cloud platform and, for example, have some performance issue with my application, then I need to investigate. But I don't want to build every service from scratch. And this combination, I think, brings us a good tooling.
Yeah. I mean, it's suddenly occurred to me that actually, that the whole thing, the whole sort of change in nature of the Windows operating system. Ronnie, you mentioned it before with WSL, the Windows subsystem for Linux, right?
Yes.
Effectively, what that is doing is saying, well, actually, we know really that one of the best tools ever, again, is the Unix terminal, with all the Unix shell tools and everything. So let's bring that, rather than try and reinvent it or make the command.exe better or make PowerShell better, let's bring a proper shell and use that. There's no shame in, realizing and recognizing that this thing that's been around for, 20, 30 years or whatever is actually the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, but without sounding harsh, but I really like that, what I would love to see is that the SAP as a company, as a whole company, makes a shift in tooling, or at least provides a certain strategy in tooling that is somehow unified, and that you can, or that appeals to you as a developer, no matter in what area you actually operate. So be it ABAP, be it the cloud platform, be it at basis level, yeah. Because I mean, what you were saying, DJ, with the SAP being, or with the ABAP systems being very proprietary. I mean, they were written in ABAP, yeah. So the ABAP is in ABAP. So that self-reliance of sorts was always fascinating to me. So in my mind, from the very beginning, they were open, because they said we're going to use the same programming language that we provide for customers for ourselves in order to use it. So it's this eat your own dog food thing. And
absolutely,
only if you do that, you have the confidence when you release something to the customers, to the developer ecosystem out there, that it's actually very well usable, because you used it yourself, and you wouldn't use it if it sucked. You only release it if it really works well.
Yeah.
So if that would be like a unified approach for developer tooling as a company stands now, I really buy into that. Yeah.
It's just occurred to me. I mean, Andreas, what do you think of the I would love to see, a language server protocol server for ABAP. Would that make sense?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Lars did maybe some investigation in this direction. But for me, as ABAP is, I think it's special. There was my article from Nigel James that ABAP gets the special snowflake.
Oh, the special
award.
snowflake. Yeah.
And I think ABAP is in many things different, not better, not worse. So it has its advantages and disadvantages. But you have to take a special view on it. And I have to think deeper into it if the language bot, the services fits for ABAP. I cannot. Yet I don't have a good idea about it.
Yeah.
I think the move to steampunk and the whitelisting approach to the language itself may help that sort of thinking, right?
That of course, yes.
Okay, we're getting short on time here. Just the link between LSP and ABAP. See Lars again comments that you can install a VS Code extension called ABAP Lint, and that uses LSP. So there's already a link there.
This is exactly.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
This project, yeah.
We are almost out of time, but I would like to thank the three of you for joining for the little discussion. It was really interesting, and I hope also that all in the watching have had a good time. I would like to just take one moment and remind everybody that we are having a fundraiser for Girls Who Code, and I would encourage you to go over there at the bit.ly/SAP online track -fundraiser and perhaps also contribute if you want to. And all donations over $10 gets put in the great raffle hat, and we have a grand prize that will be drawn tomorrow. So on that bombshell, we will hope that DJ survives the killer fly that's trying to take him out. And I would like to say thank you, and I guess goodbye.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.